Hi, my name is Samme Newcomer. Today I will be showing you my costume design for the Addams family during your opening number, When You're an Addams. So I'm assuming that many of you are very familiar with the Addams family's story, and if you're not, it follows the original characters based around Charles Addams, which shows off a very ghoulish family with a spectacular love for all things death. The original story features the unique parts of all the family, specifically following Gomez Addams during his worst nightmare, where his daughter Wednesday Addams has officially all grown up and fallen in love with a young boy. But little do the Addams know that Wednesday's boyfriend is from a normal family. Plus, Wednesday confides in her father not to tell her mother about this boy, Morticia Addams. Gomez must do what he's never done before, which is keep a secret from the love of his life. And finally, on one very exciting evening, things changed for both families when the Addams hosted dinner for Wednesday's normal boyfriend and his parents, which adds some extra spice in all of their lives. So for my character analysis, I really focused on what their personalities are like during the show, because I feel like there is a very clear difference between their moral dilemmas during the musical rather than the actual movies and shows themselves. Starting off with Wednesday Addams, she is obviously very well known for her dark and pale, grim look, who is fascinated with death, and she rarely smiles, but during the musical, she finds herself having a very sweet nature and liking things that she didn't like before, which finds her questioning her personality and her purpose throughout the musical. Going along to Pugsley Addams, he is around 11 years old, who's characterized as the husky little brother who loves being tortured by his older sister. And while he seems very innocent, I think that he is much smarter than he looks and will do whatever it takes to make sure that Wednesday doesn't leave him for her boyfriend. Moving on to Gomez and Morticia Addams, I really wanted to stick with their original personalities that have a very high sense of confidence and class. They are both very proud to be Addams, and their greatest joy is making each other and their family happy. So specifically, they both have very great comedic and dry wit. Wow, they carry themselves with high confidence and hold their heads high, which is, I think, very important to have obvious in their costumes. My overall goal is bringing life to each of the characters rather than the expected stereotypical costumes that the audience would expect for them to all come out in. I want to add pieces that fit their personality and pay attention to the specific details that not only scream, hey, I am part of the Addams family, but go along with what they're dealing with throughout the show. So with that, I want to add a lot of variations of heavy textures and shading, specifically to the Addams family and their ancestors, but in a different color palette, plus to make it a very clear, sharp difference between them and the rest of the people in the show. So with that, I'm focusing on a very dark color palette, but with very bold colors, because you can have a very dark and grim look with bold colors such as purple and red, green, all those. And with that, I want the portions of each of their costumes to match who they are and their personality. Like Morticia, you wouldn't see her in a giant ball gown. You would see her in a slim fitting velvet dress because of how she acts and how she portrays herself. While their relationship is obvious because they are all family and spend plenty of time together, they each have different and distinct personalities. So for example, while Gomez and Morticia are very sophisticated and put together, I want Wednesday to carry a very teenage energy because of her straying away from her parents' wishes and expectations and trying to find herself in her own personality, even if that adds some special style to her costume. And with that, I want it to be very specific in who they are, because Morticia and Gomez are obviously very classy and sophisticated and hold themselves with confidence because, you know, who wouldn't be proud to be an Addams? Starting off with Wednesday Addams, I obviously, like I said before, I'm straying away from her simpler looks. I chose to lean more towards the modern alternative goth look. I think that Wednesday has gone some of her mother's elegance, which I think is why a belt, cincher, corset, and plain black tights will show off her fashion sense and simple yet sophisticated looks, where she's very put together, but she's still a rebellious teenager figuring everything out in life, which I think is where a large skirt that has a lot of detail and extra tulle at the bottom to make it very dramatic, and platform boots to show that she's getting ready for the real world. Plus, I think having a very sharp contrast and soft shapes in her costume will show how she's dealing with everything at once. Like having puff sleeves but a very sharp corset will show her extra edge in her personality. Moving on to Pugsley Addams, I think a big part of Pugsley's costume comes from how he looks up to Wednesday and Gomez. A lot of the time, he's really just trying to impress both of them and make sure that they have an appreciation for him. And Majority of the time, Pugsley is portrayed as young and brilliant while also being clumsy and mischievous, and I think those are very important in his costume because they all collide with one another. So while he's trying to impress the people around him, he's also still living as an 11-year-old boy. So I think having things in his costume like wearing a tie and a button-down shirt will show that he's putting in a lot of effort to prove himself to his parents and people around him, trying to prove himself as an Addams. But he's still an 11-year-old, doesn't totally know what he's doing. So I think having the clashing colors of black and blue will show something like that. Plus, like I said, he's an 11-year-old boy. He'll totally be wearing sneakers and high socks with little skulls on them to really show himself as a younger brother. Finally, moving on to Gomez and Morticia Addams. As we've seen before, Morticia and Gomez have a very specific soulmate connection, and I wanted to make sure to show it through having similarities in their costumes. So what I was thinking, rather than having it very dark and black, I wanted to go with a dark purple velvet for both of their costumes. So usually in certain lights, the velvet looks black, but in other lights it looks purple, so it's a very sharp contrast and it looks really interesting and catches your eye very quickly. For Morticia, I wanted to keep the usual shape of her dress because it's obviously iconic and it just has so much drama in it in a way, but it shows off her sense of class and sophistication. And with Gomez, I wanted to add more class to his usual business pinstripe suit. So what I was thinking, because he has a very bright and vibrant personality, I think if he has a very distinct purple suit with specific black lace accents, it will show off himself and kind of go with Morticia's simple dress to radiate both of their senses of confidence. Then finally, during this opening scene, we see them all in the graveyard where all the ancestors come out to dance. So during When You're an Addams in the Graveyard, I think it will be especially exciting for the audience to recognize specific historical figures or celebrities that come out as ancestors, to just have this moment of realization like, oh my gosh, Elvis Presley was an Addams. So I think having things like that, and I have a list of many more ancestors such as Marilyn Monroe or Amelia Earhart, Julius Caesar, people like that, that will just make it a little more exciting. So for each of their costumes, it would be very basic costumes to make sure that it would be very obvious. You know, for Marie Antoinette, we would see a very ball gowny dress with a powdered wig and a corset top, or for Elvis, the classic aviator glasses and puffed out sleeves and everything, or Spartacus, who has the leather skirt and the large wraparound cape, those things. But I think rather than having all their colors, it should be very blue, dark gray tones to show that they just came out of a graveyard. They are dead ghosts. They shouldn't have very vibrant costumes. And I think if we put enough shading and detail in the costumes, it will be easy to tell who is who without adding all the vibrant colors. And that is the end of my presentation. So I hope you enjoy, and maybe one day you'll be able to see me actually costume for this show. Thank you.